You're watching Sovereign Judgment, and I'm glad you're here. This story is about an HOA board that thought Bylaw 14 gave them the power to fine my orchard into silence. They had the seal, the envelopes, the meeting minutes, and a $12,600 demand printed in bold red ink. What they did not have was a lawful board. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. I always like seeing how far these stories travel. Here's what happened. The county hearing room smelled like burnt coffee, wet wool, and old paper. It was 9:17 on a Tuesday morning when the clerk read the final sentence into the microphone, and every board member at the front table went still. Behind them, through the tall second-floor windows, I could see rain sliding down the glass in thin silver lines. The kind of rain that darkens asphalt and makes every car tire sound louder than it should. The president of the Briar Creek Estates Homeowners Association, Mrs. Lenora Voss, sat with both hands flat on the table. She was a narrow woman in a cream blazer with gold buttons and a pearl brooch shaped like a bee. She had worn that brooch to every meeting I had attended. I had come to think of it as part of the office she believed she owned. The clerk adjusted her glasses. By operation of Bylaw 14, Section 14.7, the board actions taken after March 8th are void. The director seats occupied by Lenora Voss, Martin Kell, Paula Dre, Howard Bixby, and Celeste Voss are deemed vacant as of the date of the first effective enforcement action. No one spoke. Then the county's HOA compliance officer, Daniel Merritt, leaned toward his microphone and said the words that ended it. There is no remaining quorum. The Briar Creek Estates Board is dissolved. The room made a sound I will never forget. Not applause, not shouting. Just the collective shift of 46 people, realizing that the people who had fined them, threatened them, and ruled over them for years had accidentally used their own bylaw to remove themselves from power. Lenora Voss turned slowly in her chair and looked at me. I did not smile. On the table in front of me was one manila folder, one certified copy of the Briar Creek bylaws, 14 photographs of my orchard, and the violation letter she had mailed to me 31 days earlier. The letter that started everything. To understand why 5 acres of apple trees brought down an entire HOA board, you have to go back to the first white envelope pinned to my gate. My name is Thomas Avery Callan. For 22 years, I worked as a real estate attorney in Alder County, mostly handling boundary disputes, easement conflicts, restrictive covenant reviews, and title defects. I retired at 59 after my left hand developed a tremor that made courtroom work more trouble than it was worth. I still had my license. I still kept my continuing education current, but I no longer took clients. By then, all I wanted was quiet. My wife, Ellen, and I lived on 8.5 acres at the south edge of Briar Creek, a planned community built around curving roads, decorative ponds, and houses set back exactly 30 feet from the curb. Our place did not match the rest of it. It never had. The land had belonged to my grandfather before Briar Creek existed. In 1958, he planted the first row of Arkansas black apple trees along the ridge, where the soil drained well and the afternoon sun stayed warm even in October. My father expanded the orchard in 1979, adding pear trees, 2 rows of peaches, and a cedar-sided packing shed with a galvanized roof. When I was a child, that shed smelled like sawdust, bruised apples, and machine oil from the old belt sorter my father kept running, long after parts became impossible to find. By the time developers came through in the late 90s, my parents had sold off 26 acres, but kept the original orchard parcel and the farmhouse. The subdivision wrapped around us like water around a stone. Briar Creek Estates recorded its declaration in 1999. My parents' retained parcel was listed in the survey notes as Callan Agricultural Reserve, Parcel A17, excluded from residential covenant burden except as expressly stated. My father made sure of that. He had watched too many neighbors lose control of family land because they trusted handshakes and brochures. He hired an attorney named Paul Wenner to review every page before he signed the sale contract. I still have Paul's handwritten margin notes in a blue folder. Orchard use preserved. No design review authority over agricultural structures. Access easement fixed. No assessment obligation unless annexed by written consent. My father died in 2011. My mother followed in 2016. Ellen and I moved into the farmhouse permanently the next spring. We did not run the orchard commercially in any serious way. Every September, we opened the South Rows for 3 weekends. Families came to pick apples. I charged $8 for a small paper bag and $14 for a large one. Most of the money paid for pruning, irrigation repairs, and the part-time help I hired from the agricultural program at Hartwell Community College. It was not a business in the way the HOA later claimed. It was a family tradition with a cash box. I kept records anyway. Receipts, insurance certificates, soil reports, spray logs, county agricultural exemption filings, annual gross receipts, visitor counts, copies of the original 1999 reservation documents. I kept them in labeled binders on the bottom shelf of my office, because property disputes rarely begin with bulldozers. They begin with someone saying, "We have authority," and assuming no one will ask them to prove it. The first envelope appeared on my gate on Friday, September 8th. It had rained the night before, and the orchard smelled clean and metallic, the way wet leaves do when summer is giving up. I was walking down the gravel drive at 6:40 in the morning, with my pruning shears in my back pocket and a mug of coffee in my right hand. The sun had just cleared the roofline of the packing shed. Drops of water hung from the bottom wire of the deer fence. The envelope was clipped to the gate with a black binder clip. Not mailed, not hand-delivered to the house. Pinned where every jogger and dog walker could see it. Across the front, in red capital letters, someone had stamped, "Final Notice of Violation." Inside was a 3-page letter on Briar Creek Estates HOA letterhead. The logo was embossed at the top, a little creek winding under a stone bridge. The letter accused me of operating an unauthorized agricultural retail enterprise in violation of Bylaw 14. It cited commercial nuisance conditions, unapproved signage, excess vehicle ingress, and non-conforming outdoor storage. The amount due was $12,600. The letter said the fine would increase by $300 per day if I did not cease all orchard operations within 72 hours. It was signed by Lenora Voss, board president. I read it twice while standing beside the gate. Then I took a photograph of the envelope where it had been clipped, another of the letter on the hood of my truck, and a third showing the timestamp on my phone. At 7:12, a silver Lexus SUV stopped on the road outside my gate. Lenora Voss stepped out wearing white pants, tan driving gloves, and that cream blazer with the bee brooch. Her hair was cut into a hard silver bob that did not move in the wind. Behind her came Martin Kell, the HOA treasurer, a heavy man with a red face and a canvas folder tucked under his arm. Lenora did not greet me. "Mr. Callan," she said, "I see you received the notice. I found an envelope clipped to my gate. That is acceptable delivery under our enforcement procedures." "Which procedures?" She smiled the way people smile when they think patience is generosity. "Bylaw 14. You will find the relevant authority cited in the letter." I looked down at the pages again. What section of Bylaw 14 makes my parcel subject to Briar Creek commercial use enforcement? Martin Kell opened his folder but did not remove anything. Lenora's smile narrowed. "Your property sits inside the visual boundary of Briar Creek Estates. That wasn't my question." "Mr. Callan, this board is not here to debate legal technicalities at your gate. I understand. The orchard operation ends by Monday at noon, or the fine begins accruing. We are also prepared to notify your insurer, the county zoning office, and any vendors associated with this activity." She said activity, as if children picking apples were a criminal enterprise. I folded the letter along its original crease. "Please send all further communication by mail. We already have authority to proceed." Then mail it. For a moment, the only sound was water dripping from the leaves onto the gravel. Lenora looked past me toward the orchard. The first row of Arkansas blacks stood behind the fence, dark red fruit hanging under wet branches. My father used to say those apples looked like small planets before harvest. "This neighborhood has standards," she said. "So does the county recorder." She did not like that. Martin Kell gave a short laugh, but it came out weak. Lenora turned back toward her SUV. "You have 72 hours. They left without asking another question. I stood at the gate until the Lexus disappeared around the curve near Hawthorne Pond. Then I walked back to the house, dried the letter with a paper towel where one corner had picked up rain, and placed it in a plastic sleeve. At 8:03, I opened the first binder. There is a particular kind of quiet that falls over a house when you begin document work. The refrigerator hums louder. The clock sounds sharper. The paper feels heavier, because you know every page might matter later. I started with the obvious. The Briar Creek Estates Declaration of Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, recorded October 14, 1999, in Alder County Instrument Book 417, page 882. I had a certified copy, but I pulled a fresh one from the Alder County Recorder's online index to confirm no amendments had been filed without notice. The system was called Land Trace. It was ugly, slow, and reliable. Parcel A17 appeared exactly where it always had, excluded from residential covenant burden, except as expressly stated. No assessment obligation, no architectural review, no prohibition on agricultural use. Then I searched the Briar Creek amendments. There were 9. Most dealt with roof colors, rental restrictions, mailbox designs, and pond maintenance assessments. None annexed Parcel A17. None bore my parents' signatures. None bore mine. Then I opened the HOA's bylaws. Bylaw 14 was not what Lenora's letter implied. The heading read, Special Enforcement Proceedings and Director Eligibility Certification. That alone made me sit back. I had read those bylaws years earlier, but not closely enough to remember the details. Most homeowners never read bylaws until someone weaponizes them. Most board members never read past the sections that sound useful. Bylaw 14 did allow the board to initiate special enforcement proceedings for activities alleged to create substantial nuisance impact upon association members. That was the part Lenora had seized. But Section 14.3 required written jurisdictional findings before any notice could issue. The board had to identify the covenant burdening the target property, the recorded instrument creating authority, and the parcel's assessment status. The letter to me did none of that. Section 14.5 required a pre-enforcement vote by a lawfully seated board, with each director certifying eligibility, ownership status, assessment standing, and lack of conflict. That was more interesting. Section 14.7 was the hinge. I printed it on yellow paper and set it apart from the rest. It read, Any enforcement action initiated under this bylaw by a director later determined to have been ineligible at the time of certification shall be void ab initio. The director's seat shall be deemed vacant as of the date of the defective certification. If such vacancy or vacancies eliminate quorum, all subsequent board actions shall be suspended, pending a special election, supervised by the County Common Interest Community Administrator. I read that paragraph 4 times. Then I pulled the corporate filings from the State Association's registry. Briar Creek Estates HOA was active, but its annual director report listed 5 board members: Lenora Voss, Martin Kell, Paula Dre, Howard Bixby, and Celeste Voss. Celeste Voss was Lenora's daughter-in-law. I made a note. Next, I opened the Alder County Assessor's parcel database. Ownership records are not exciting until they are. Lenora Voss still owned her home on Briar Bend Lane. Martin Kell owned his. Howard Bixby owned his. Paula Dre did not. Her property had been transferred 18 months earlier to Red Umbrella Holdings, LLC. She was not listed as a member in the state LLC filing. Under Briar Creek's bylaws, a director had to be an individual record owner or the formally designated representative of an entity owner. There was no designation recorded in the HOA minutes. Celeste Voss did not own property either. Her husband, Evan Voss, owned the house on Juniper Court, as separate property acquired before their marriage. The bylaws did not allow spouses to serve unless they were on title or formally designated by the title owner. I searched the minutes. No designation. Then I checked assessment ledgers in the HOA packet Lenora herself had distributed at the annual meeting in May. I still had it in my file because I keep things other people throw away. Martin Kell, the treasurer, had marked his own account as deferred pending landscape credit. That phrase had bothered me at the time. It bothered me more now. Bylaw 3.2 said no member more than 60 days delinquent in assessments could serve as director. The ledger showed Martin's $840 quarterly assessment was 91 days unpaid on the date Lenora's board voted to send my violation notice. 3 of 5 directors were likely ineligible. I did not celebrate. I did not call Ellen into the room. I did not send an email to the board. I created a timeline. March 8th board meeting minutes show adoption of Orchard Enforcement Initiative. March 9th, Director Eligibility Certifications signed. March 10th, first draft of violation letter circulated. September 8th, final notice clipped to my gate. Then I searched the county administrator's website for common interest community filings. Briar Creek had submitted its mandatory board certification form in April. Attached were the same 5 director names. The signatures were scanned. The certifications included one sentence above each signature. I certify under penalty of removal, pursuant to Bylaw 14.7, that I am eligible to serve. Lenora had not just cited Bylaw 14. She had built her enforcement action directly on the part of it that could dissolve her board. At 11:46 that morning, I printed the certifications and placed them behind the yellow copy of Section 14.7. Then I closed the binder and went outside. The orchard was warming in the sun. Steam lifted from the grass between the rows. A crow sat on the packing shed roof and knocked its beak against the metal ridge cap. I stood beneath the oldest tree, the first one my grandfather planted, and rested my hand on the bark. I knew then that the outcome was no longer a question of whether Lenora had overreached. It was a question of how much of her own paperwork she would force me to use. She forced me to use all of it. By noon on Monday, I had not closed the orchard. I had, however, removed the small chalkboard sign from the gate and replaced it with a printed notice. Private Property Callan Agricultural Reserve Nohoa Authority. Asserted or accepted visitors. By invitation only. I installed it on 2 cedar posts, set 12 inches inside my property line. I had measured the line twice. At 12:14, Lenora emailed me. The subject line read, "Non-compliance confirmed." The body of the email was 4 paragraphs long and copied the entire board, the HOA's management company, and a general inbox at Alder County Code Compliance. She wrote that I had openly defied lawful neighborhood governance, and that the board would now apply daily monetary consequences authorized under Bylaw 14. I saved the email as a PDF. At 12:22, I replied with one sentence. Please provide the recorded instrument making parcel A17 subject to the enforcement authority you claim. No one answered. On Tuesday, a second notice arrived by certified mail. This one stated that my fine had increased to $12,900. It included photographs of 3 minivans parked along the gravel shoulder near my gate during the previous Saturday's picking hours. The photographs had been taken from inside a vehicle. One frame caught the corner of Lenora's dashboard, and the same bee brooch reflected faintly in the windshield. I logged the envelope number, scanned the letter, saved the photographs, and added them to the binder. On Wednesday, Briar Creek's private Facebook group lit up. I was not a member, but my neighbor, Elise Moreno, was. Elise lived 2 streets over on Cottonwood Place. She was a school librarian, widowed, and far more patient than most people deserved. The board had fined her $1,750 the previous year for keeping a wheelchair ramp on her front steps longer than the 90-day temporary accommodation period the HOA had invented. She fought them for 6 months and paid only after they threatened a lien. At 7:38 Wednesday evening, Elise forwarded me screenshots. Lenora had posted, "Briar Creek residents deserve protection from unlicensed commercial operations attracting outside traffic. The board is taking lawful action under Bylaw 14 after repeated non-compliance by the orchard property." There had been no repeated non-compliance. There had been one letter clipped to my gate. Under the post, Martin Kell wrote, "Some people think old family arrangements put them above the rules. They are about to learn otherwise." I saved every screenshot. At 9:05 that night, I received an email from a man named Calvin Roque, who identified himself as legal counsel for Briar Creek Estates HOA. The email said the board had authorized him to pursue injunctive relief, lien remedies, recovery of attorney's fees, and a referral for agricultural licensing investigation. I searched the state bar directory. Calvin Roque had been suspended from practice 11 months earlier for failure to comply with trust account reporting requirements. His status was listed in red, not eligible to practice law. I printed the page. Then I checked his email signature. He called himself Counselor at Law, listed a suite number in the city of Stonebridge, and attached a PDF demand letter on letterhead that included a Scales of Justice logo. I did not reply. On Friday morning, a white pickup with the logo of Briar Creek Property Management stopped outside my gate. A man in a blue polo stepped out, holding a roll of orange stickers. I watched from the porch as he approached my sign. I walked down slowly. "Can I help you?" He looked uncomfortable before he spoke. "Board instructed us to mark unauthorized signage." "What's your name?" "Jared Pike." "Jared, you're standing on my driveway." He looked at the gravel under his shoes, then at the sign. "They said this was common frontage. Did they give you a survey?" "No, sir." "Did they give you written permission from me?" He swallowed. "No, sir." I pointed to the small black camera mounted under the gatepost cap. "This conversation is being recorded. You are welcome to leave. If you place that sticker on my sign, I will report it as trespass and property damage." Jared looked relieved to have a reason not to do it. "I'm going to call my supervisor." "That would be wise." He returned to his truck and left 5 minutes later without placing the sticker. At 10:31, Lenora emailed the board and accidentally copied me. Management failed to execute signage removal due to intimidation by owner. We need stronger action before the weekend crowds arrive. That sentence became important later. By the second weekend, the orchard had become a spectacle. Not because of me, because Lenora made it one. She sent a community alert to all Briar Creek homeowners, warning them that outside visitors to my orchard posed risks to traffic flow, child safety, and property values. She attached a map with red arrows, showing supposed traffic congestion along Briar Bend Lane. The arrows were not based on traffic counts. They were drawn over the wrong road segment. She instructed residents to photograph license plates. That was when I stopped treating it as a nuisance and started treating it as exposure. At 6:30 Saturday morning, before opening the gate, I placed 4 signs at the edge of the gravel lot inside my parcel. Notice this property is under video recording. Visitors may not be photographed or harassed from HOA common areas. Questions may be directed to owner. Then I called Officer Naomi Trent at the Alder County Sheriff's Office non-emergency line. I had known Naomi since she testified in a boundary trespass case I handled years earlier. I told her there was a potential civil dispute, and that I did not need intervention unless someone blocked the drive or approached visitors aggressively. She said, "You want it logged?" "Yes. I'll create a call note." "Thank you." By noon, 3 HOA board members had parked along the opposite shoulder. Martin Kell stood beside his truck, pretending to check his phone, while filming families entering my gate. Paula Dre sat in a folding chair with a clipboard. Celeste Voss walked a small white dog back and forth along the fence line every 15 minutes. At 12:44, a father carrying a bag of apples asked me quietly, "Are we allowed to be here?" I said, "Yes. You are on private property with permission." His daughter, maybe 6 years old, held a red apple in both hands, like it was something fragile. That was the moment I decided not to let Lenora simply withdraw the letter later and pretend nothing had happened. On Monday, I called Marisol Keene. Marisol was the best property and common interest community attorney in Alder County. She had a small office above a bakery in Greyhaven and a habit of reading documents in complete silence before saying anything at all. I had referred clients to her for years. Now I was the client. I brought 3 binders to her office. Binder 1, title history, recorded declarations, parcel maps, agricultural exemption records. Binder 2, HOA bylaws, amendments, board minutes, director certifications, assessment ledgers. Binder 3, violation notices, emails, Facebook screenshots, photographs, rope demand letter, camera stills. Marisol spread the documents across her conference table. Outside the window, rainwater dripped from the bakery awning onto the sidewalk in steady taps. She read for 26 minutes without speaking. Then she put her finger on Bylaw 14.7. They cited this bylaw? Yes. And their enforcement vote was March 8th? Yes. Paula Dre was not a record owner on March 8th? No. Celeste Voss was not a record owner? No. Martin Kell was delinquent beyond 60 days. According to the ledger they distributed, Marisol leaned back. That gives us 3 defective certifications out of 5. Enough to eliminate quorum? More than enough. I asked her the question I had come to ask. If we invoke 14.7, does it only void the orchard fine, or does it vacate the seats? She looked down at the page again. The language says shall, not may. Not subject to board discretion, shall. And if the seats are vacated, there is no board. She closed the binder. Tom. They wrote a self-destruct mechanism into their own governance documents, probably to make enforcement look serious. Then they forgot it applied to them. That was the first time I felt anything close to satisfaction. Not joy, not anger, just the clean click of a lock opening. Marisol prepared a formal evidence package. It was 87 pages long. The cover letter cited Bylaw 14.3, 14.5, and 14.7. It included certified copies of the declaration, assessor printouts for each director's property, the state LLC filing for Red Umbrella Holdings, the assessment ledger showing Martin Kell's delinquency, and screenshots of Lenora's public statements claiming Bylaw 14 authority. We did not send it to Lenora first. Under the county's Common Interest Community Ordinance, disputes involving board eligibility and bylaw-triggered vacancy had to be filed with the County Common Interest Community Administrator. That office could review documents, issue administrative findings, and supervise special elections when an HOA board lost quorum. On September 28 at 9:02 a.m., Marisol filed the petition electronically. At 9:17, I mailed a courtesy copy to Briar Creek Estates HOA by certified mail. At 9:22, I mailed one to the management company. At 9:31, I mailed one to Calvin Roque, though Marisol's cover letter addressed him as Mr. Roque rather than counsel, and noted his suspended bar status in footnote 3. We gave everyone notice. No traps, no surprises, no hidden moves, only documents. That same afternoon, I hired Arden Vale Surveying to refresh the boundary markers along the road frontage and orchard entrance. The original pins were still present, but I wanted visible stakes because visible facts prevent convenient confusion. Arden Vale sent a crew of 2 on October 2nd. They wore orange vests and carried a robotic total station that beeped softly each time it locked onto the prism. By 11:30, 6 pink flags marked the line between my parcel and Briar Creek's common drainage strip. The flags showed something Lenora had either ignored or never understood. My gate, my sign, and the gravel parking area were entirely inside Parcel A17. The shoulder where board members had been standing to photograph visitors was partly inside a public right-of-way, but the slope they kept stepping onto was mine. I sent the surveyor's stamped exhibit to Marisol. She forwarded it to the county administrator and the board with a plain warning. Any further entry upon Parcel A17 without permission may be treated as trespass. Any further enforcement under Bylaw 14, while eligibility is under review, may compound the alleged governance defect. Lenora responded in 23 minutes. This board will not be intimidated by legal theatrics. The orchard enforcement will continue. She copied 38 people. I saved the email. The decisive move happened on October 7th. Not in a courtroom, not at a meeting. At the orchard gate, it was the third and final public picking weekend. The sky was clear, the air was cool, and the trees had that late-season stillness that comes when the fruit is heavy and the leaves are tired. I had opened the gate at 8 o'clock sharp. By 9:15, there were 11 cars parked neatly inside the gravel area, 2 volunteers weighing bags near the shed, and Ellen sitting at the cash table with a thermos of tea. At 9:42, a Briar Creek maintenance cart rolled up to the gate. Behind it came Lenora's silver Lexus and Martin Kell's truck. 2 maintenance workers stepped out with a laminated sign, "Cease unauthorized commercial activity. By order of Briar Creek Estates HOA Bylaw 14, enforcement in effect." The sign had holes drilled in the corners and zip ties already looped through them. Lenora stepped out of the Lexus wearing the cream blazer. The bee brooch caught the morning sun. I walked to the gate with my phone recording in my shirt pocket. Officer Naomi Trent had already been notified that morning because Marisol expected something like this. I had not asked for a deputy to stand watch. I had simply asked that any call from Briar Creek be tied to the existing civil dispute log. Lenora held a folder against her chest. "Mr. Callan, this is your final opportunity to comply voluntarily." I looked at the sign. "Where do you intend to place that?" "On the gate." This gate is on parcel A17. It fronts our community. That is not a legal category. Martin Kell stepped forward. We're done playing games with you. I turned to the maintenance workers. Gentlemen, you have received the survey exhibit dated October 2nd. One of them looked at Lenora. She said, "Proceed." I said, "Before you do, I am informing you that you do not have permission to attach anything to my gate. The property line is marked. The dispute is filed with the county. If you attach the sign, you are doing so after notice." The younger worker lowered his hands. Lenora snapped, "Do your job." The older worker shook his head. "No, ma'am, not without something from the county." Martin took the sign from him. He walked to the gate and began threading the zip tie through the wire. I did not stop him. I did not raise my voice. I simply said, "The time is 9:48 a.m. Martin Kell is attaching an HOA enforcement sign to my gate, after being informed the gate is private property." He pulled the zip tie tight. That was the visible act everyone saw. But it was not the true decisive move. The true decisive move arrived 7 minutes later in a white county sedan. Daniel Merritt, the Common Interest Community Administrator, stepped out wearing a navy rain jacket over a dress shirt. With him was Deputy Lorna Hale from the Sheriff's Civil Division. Daniel carried a clipboard and a stamped notice. Lenora looked almost pleased. "Good," she said. "You can explain to Mr. Callan that the board has enforcement authority." Daniel did not look at me first. He looked at the sign Martin had just attached. "Who placed that?" Martin said. "I did. Under board authorization." Daniel made a note. Then he handed Lenora the stamped notice. "Mrs. Voss, this office issued an interim administrative stay at 8:55 this morning on all Bylaw 14 enforcement actions pending eligibility review." It was sent to the association's registered email and management company. Lenora's face changed by one small degree. "I have not reviewed that. It was delivered. We are still within our authority." Daniel turned a page on his clipboard. "Not to continue enforcement under the bylaw under review." I removed my copy of the stay from my folder and handed it to Deputy Hale. She glanced at it, then at the sign. Lenora's voice sharpened. "This man is running a business inside our community. We have residents demanding action," Daniel said. "The question today is not the orchard. The question is whether your board was lawfully seated when it invoked Bylaw 14. Martin laughed once. "That's ridiculous." Daniel looked at him. "Mr. Kell, were you more than 60 days delinquent in assessments on March 8th? The laugh stopped. Lenora said, "That is internal association accounting." Daniel continued. "Mrs. Voss, was Paula Dre a record owner of a Briar Creek lot on March 8th? Lenora's mouth tightened. "And was Celeste Voss a record owner or designated representative?" Behind us, the orchard had gone quiet. Families stood between the rows holding paper bags. Elise Moreno was near the cash table, watching with both hands wrapped around a cup of cider. Lenora lifted her chin. "We will address all of this at the hearing." Daniel nodded. "You will. Until then, no enforcement under Bylaw 14. Deputy Hale pointed at the sign. "Take it down." Martin did not move. The deputy's voice remained even. "You placed it. Remove it." He cut the zip tie with a pocket knife and pulled the sign from the gate. That image traveled through Briar Creek faster than any letter I could have sent. Not because I posted it, I didn't. But 3 residents recorded it from the road, and Lenora had trained the neighborhood to watch the orchard. By sunset, everyone had seen the HOA treasurer remove his own enforcement sign under instruction from a county official. 4 days later, the public confrontation came. The Briar Creek Board called an emergency community meeting for October 11th at the clubhouse. The notice said the board would address misinformation regarding orchard enforcement and ongoing threats to association authority. Marisol advised me to attend and say as little as possible. I sat in the 3rd row with Ellen on my right and Elise Moreno on my left. Marisol sat at the aisle with a leather folio on her lap. The clubhouse smelled like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. Folding chairs had been arranged in rows facing a long table where the 5 board members sat beneath a framed watercolor of the subdivision entrance. Lenora opened the meeting at 6:02 p.m. She tapped the microphone twice. "This board has been subjected to a campaign of harassment by a non-compliant property owner who refuses to respect community standards. Several people looked back at me. I kept my hands folded. Lenora continued for 12 minutes. She spoke about traffic, liability, children's safety, neighborhood harmony, and the need for strong leadership. Then she held up the violation letter she had sent me. This enforcement was authorized under Bylaw 14. The board followed the process exactly. That sentence mattered. Marisol leaned toward me and whispered, "There it is." Lenora then invited Calvin Roque to speak. He stood near the refreshment table wearing a gray suit that fit poorly at the shoulders. He introduced himself as legal counsel for the association. Marisol stood. Point of order. Lenora sighed. "This is not a courtroom, Miss Keene." "No. But Mr. Roque just represented himself to members as legal counsel. His state bar status is suspended." The room shifted. Calvin Roque's face went pale. Lenora said, "That is irrelevant to tonight's agenda." Marisol held up one page. "It is relevant if the board relied on legal advice from someone not eligible to practice law while issuing enforcement demands to members and non-members." A man in the second row said, "Wait, he's not a lawyer?" Calvin said, "My administrative status is being resolved." Marisol said, "You are suspended." He sat down. Lenora tried to recover. "As I said, Bylaw 14 gives this board authority." Elise stood. Her voice was quiet, but the microphone picked it up because she was close to the aisle. "Does Bylaw 14 also say ineligible board members are removed?" Lenora blinked. "That is a misinterpretation being circulated by Mr. Callan." Marisol opened her folio. "The bylaw can speak for itself." She handed a certified copy to the management company representative, who had been asked to serve as meeting secretary. His name was Owen Pike, and he looked like a man realizing he should have stayed home. Marisol said, "Please read section 14.7 aloud." Lenora objected immediately. "This is not on the agenda." A homeowner near the back said, "You put Bylaw 14 on the agenda." Another said, "Read it." Owen Pike looked at Lenora. Then he looked at the room. He read it. "Any enforcement action initiated under this bylaw by a director, later determined to have been ineligible at the time of certification, shall be void ab initio. The director's seat shall be deemed vacant as of the date of the defective certification. If such vacancy or vacancies eliminate quorum, all subsequent board actions shall be suspended, pending a special election, supervised by the County Common Interest Community Administrator." When he finished, the room was silent. Marisol handed him 3 assessor records and 1 assessment ledger. "Please mark those for the minutes." Lenora's voice became cold. "You have no right to conduct a trial here." I stood then. Only then. I said, "I have one question." Lenora stared at me. I looked at the meeting secretary, not at her. "Madam President, did each director sign the March 9th Bylaw 14 eligibility certification before sending the orchard violation?" She answered too quickly. "Yes, of course we did." Marisol placed the signed certifications on the table. That was the board's own document, their own signatures, their own chosen mechanism. Then she placed the assessor records beside them. Paula Dre had signed as a director after transferring title to an LLC with no designation. Celeste Voss had signed as a director without being on title. Martin Kell had signed while delinquent beyond 60 days. According to the ledger he had distributed as treasurer. 3 signatures, 3 defects, 1 bylaw. The room did not explode. It unraveled. A man named Peter Lang, who had lived in Briar Creek since 2003, stood up holding a folder of his own. He said the board had fined him $900 under Bylaw 14 for a work trailer parked during his kitchen remodel. A woman named Darla Hume said her son had been threatened with towing under the same authority. Elise said her wheelchair ramp fine had been approved by the same board after March 8th. Lenora banged the gavel. "This meeting is adjourned," Marisol said. "It is not adjourned if there is no lawful chair." Lenora froze. That was the first time I saw her understand the shape of the problem. Not the orchard. Not me. The chair beneath her. The title in front of her name. The authority she had used like a hammer. All of it depended on the validity of a board that Bylaw 14 itself might have already dissolved. The county hearing was scheduled for October 24th. By then, the evidence had grown. After the clubhouse meeting, 18 residents sent documents to Marisol or directly to Daniel Merritt's office. 11 had received fines or threats under Bylaw 14 after March 8th. 5 had paid money. 2 had been sent lien warning letters. One elderly couple had paid $2,400 to remove a vegetable stand from their driveway, even though they were selling tomatoes for a church fundraiser. The pattern mattered. Lenora had not made one mistake with my orchard. She had built an enforcement campaign on a bylaw that required strict board eligibility, while operating with a board that did not meet the standard. The hearing took place in room 204 of the Alder County Administrative Building. The walls were beige. The carpet was the color of dust. A digital recorder sat on the table between two microphones. Daniel Merritt presided. Deputy Lorna Hale stood at the back because tempers had been high after the clubhouse meeting. Marisol represented me. Briar Creek appeared with no attorney. Calvin Roque did not attend. Lenora brought binders. So did I. The hearing lasted 1 hour and 43 minutes. Daniel asked first for proof that parcel A17 was subject to Briar Creek's commercial use restrictions. Lenora produced a subdivision map with my orchard drawn inside a shaded outline labeled Community Area. Marisol produced the recorded declaration, excluding parcel A17 from residential covenant burden, except as expressly stated. Daniel asked Lenora for the express covenant. She did not have one. Then he